Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation about supply and demand and expanding on what we talked about last time regarding consumer and producer surplus by looking at what happens when the market does not reach equilibrium. And oftentimes it doesn't reach equilibrium because the government has imposed either what we call price or quantity controls. So we will talk about the difference between what are known as price ceilings and price floors, talk about why they are implemented and their impact on the market. And we'll also discuss what are known as quotas, which are quantity controls, and we'll see what happens to the market when we have those and what happens to overall surplus. As we start, we look at a point that Thomas Sowell has made about economics. He says it's the study of cause and effect relationships in an economy. Its purpose is to discern the consequences of various ways of allocating resources which have alternative uses. It has nothing to say about philosophy or values any more than it has to say about music or literature. So economics is a study of what is. It's not really a study of what ought to be. That's a policy decision. That's a government decision. It's a values decision or a sociological choice. But economics is just saying, if these conditions exist, what will happen in the market? We're not saying it's good or bad, right or wrong, or anything in between. Just this is what will be. And so the decision that a price is either too high or too low is not an economic thing. It is more of a moral issue or an ethical issue or a policy decision. So there are times in which people, governments, make decisions about what the price of a good ought to be because it's perceived as being too high or too low to meet our personal set of beliefs. One of those things that is implemented is what's known as a price ceiling. Price ceilings are intended to stop the price from rising and reaching equilibrium. Because what we have identified so far is that the market always wants to get to equilibrium. It's a magnetic point that when price is not at equilibrium, it's trying to get there. But there are times in which people will look at the market and say, we don't want the price to get to equilibrium. If it goes too high, if it goes much higher, then we have some philosophical concerns. And so we want to stop it from rising. And so we'll set what's known as the price ceiling. And when we set a price ceiling, it does sort of affect the market. If I say the price can go no higher than $2, then we won't be able to sell as many as if it goes up to the equilibrium price of 3. At an equilibrium price of 3, the market would sell 10 units. But if the price is fixed or set at a ceiling of $2, then there will be 6 units supplied, 14 demanded. 14 is in Neverland. We can't get there. So we cannot purchase what isn't being produced. So while we want 14, there's only 6 available. So with a price ceiling, we would have a price of 2 and a quantity of 6. We often see these price ceilings in situations where there's a concern that a higher price will harm consumers. Sort of the traditional example is what we call rent controls. So we could say that a local government determines that they want people to be able to both live and work in their community. And we say that the rents are too high in a certain area. And so we don't want them to go beyond a certain point because that would then price people out. And so let's set a price ceiling to stop the price from rising. So in this example, if the price the market wants to set is $600 for apartments, and there would be 50,000 apartments sold, we say, no, that price is too high for philosophical reasons. So why don't we set a limit at $500? Then when we do that, then we create a shortage of apartments. At a price of $500, we will see that the quantity supplied is 40,000 apartments, but the quantity demanded is 70,000. So we have a shortage of 30,000 units. We cannot rent apartments that don't exist. So we can't rent 70, we can only rent the 40 that exist. So the rent control has the impact of lowering the price for people who are able to get the good, but it does have a negative consequences in that it reduces the number of goods available. Left alone, the market would have produced 50,000 apartments, but because of the rent control, because of the price ceiling, there are now only 40,000 apartments. So yes, It's great for the 40,000 who can get an apartment because they're cheaper than they were before. But it is not so good for the 10,000 people who used to get an apartment, who would be willing to get an apartment and pay a higher price, who can no longer get the apartment because the government has set a limit to how much is able to be charged and how much they're able to pay. So the consequence of price ceilings is, one, inefficient allocation. We're going to have fewer goods than people want, which is not helpful. We'll also end up with wasted resources, because what happens is people sit there in a rent control area and an apartment becomes available. Well, there's lots and lots of people who want it, and there's only one apartment. So what ends up happening is, once you find out that there's an apartment available in a building, then it is in your best interest to drop everything that you're doing, whether it's work or whatever, and race to the apartment building, try and be first in line to get it. Because it doesn't really matter what you're willing to pay. The price is set by the government, so whoever shows up first gets it. So you're gonna have lots and lots of people racing to try and be the first one to the door to get the apartment. One person gets it, everyone else just wasted their time. The other problem is that it creates a very low quality of good. The quality of the good is commensurate with the price that's paid. So if I can only charge $400 for an apartment instead of $600, then as the owner of the apartment, I will allow the quality to degrade down to $400. I don't need to make it nicer because there's not enough to go around anyway. So the quality can shrink and you're still going to rent from me because you don't really have many other options. And so the quality will diminish with the diminished price that can be charged. There's also an incentive for black markets to appear, for people to offer to offer products at a higher price than the government has set, but off the books. And so this sort of black market activity creates its own set of legal entanglements and problems. The opposite of a price ceiling is a price floor. We might say, in this case, it's not that the price is too high, it's that we're afraid that the equilibrium price will be too low. It'll harm suppliers if we let the price drop. And so let's set a price floor that prevents the price from falling down to where it wants to go. And so when we set this price floor, it prevents us from getting to equilibrium, and it also leads to fewer goods being bought and sold than before. In this case, when the market is left to itself, it's a $3 price and 10 quantities sold. If the price floor is set at $5, the price can't drop below 5, then we would be demanding 2 products, but suppliers will be making 18. So we have a surplus of 16 units, lots and lots left over. With no real way to get rid of them, by the way, because we can't let the price drop to clear that surplus. School lunches might be an example of this, where we might guarantee a price support for farmers. We say you're growing corn, we guarantee you a certain amount, a certain price for your corn, and any corn that you raise, that you grow, that you can't sell at this higher price, the government will just come and buy it off your hands. We got to do something with it, so let's throw it to kids at school lunch. Right? It creates a surplus. So one of the challenges to the price floor is the surplus. Again, inefficient resource allocation, because what we have is lots and lots of goods being made and being bought off by the government because the price is too high for consumers, much higher than they're willing to pay. You also end up with products that are too good in quality. Again, the quality of the good is commensurate with the price. So if I have a price higher than equilibrium, that the quality of the good rises, because it turns out that if you and I are both producing the same product, let's say we've got a price floor on airline tickets, then we both know that you and I are running airlines, and there's lots and lots of seats, but not enough people to fill them because the price is sort of artificially too high. So you and I are competing, and both of us would like to fill our airplanes. So what are we going to do? I can't compete with you on price. It's against the law for me to lower my price in order to steal customers from you. I have to charge the higher price. So what will I do? Well, if I have to charge $600 for a plane ticket instead of the $400 that the market wants to charge, then I better make it $600 of value. I'm going to try and steal customers from you by offering them other things that make the flight more enjoyable. So I'll give more leg room. I'll give nicer meals. I'll have wider aisles. I'll have better movies. I'm really sort of enhancing the experience for the consumer in order to try and drive them into my airplane. Because if I don't do that and you do, then I have empty airplanes and your airplanes are filled. And so the quality rises beyond what it really ought to be. And then again, you've got black market operations here. You've got the possibility of people selling things for less off the books. And anytime you're sort of doing things off the books, you're inviting real problems with crime and other issues. One thing that students struggle with is keeping straight in their heads where a price ceiling and price floor should be drawn. So one way to think of it is that the market is like a two-story house where supply and demand intersect. That's the equilibrium price, and that equilibrium price is sort of that line that differentiates between the first floor and the second floor. So if you're sitting there in the kitchen and you're looking up towards what amounts to equilibrium, then when you look up, you see the ceiling. So price ceilings are set below equilibrium. And if I'm upstairs in the shower and I look down towards what amounts to equilibrium, when I look down, what do I see? I see the floor. So the floor is always set above the equilibrium price because the purpose is to stop us from falling down, which is what the floor is doing, right? If I'm staying on the second floor, gravity is sucking me down to the center of the earth. Just like when the price is set above the equilibrium point, the price is being drawn down to equilibrium. To stop myself from falling to the center of the earth, I had better have a floor or I'm going to keep falling until I hit something. Right? So floors are always set above equilibrium and ceilings are set below. The bottom of the floor is the ceiling. If you're standing on the second floor and you're looking down at the floor, the bottom of that floor is in fact the ceiling because the person on the first floor is looking up at the same thing, right? But from their perspective, it's a ceiling. So it is important to keep them straight in your head when you're drawing them out. One classic thing that the AP likes to do is to ask you a question about a price ceiling or price floor, and you have to make sure that it's actually doing something, right? Is it effective? Is it accomplishing what it's set out to do? So in this market for butter, if I said how much butter would be purchased at the price floor is at 90 cents per pound, price floor is to stop the price from falling below 90 cents. Well, if I look at the market, I can see that equilibrium price is $1 because the quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. So the price is $1. Price floor is intended to stop price from falling. Would the price of the market in the market fall to 90 cents? The answer is no. It would stop at $1. It's not going to go any lower because it stops at equilibrium. So if you were to ask yourself how many pounds of butter would be sold if the price floor is 90 cents, I would say 10 will be sold because that price floor is ineffective. It's doing no good. But if I set the price floor at $1.20, I don't want the price to fall below 120. Well, then that does do something because without the price floor, I drop as far as $1. So I set that floor at $1.20. How much is going to get sold? Well, there's 9 demanded, 12 sold. You can't sell what people don't want. So there will be 9 pounds of butter sold in this market. So you do have to ask yourself, so to go through that process, is this price control doing what it's supposed to do? The other type of control is what we call quantity control. And we see that in things like crab fishing, where if we were to let the market capture all of the crab that it wants, it would fish crab out of existence. So we say, well, that's not helpful. So let's set up a quota, a maximum amount of product that can be produced. So we could say that in the market for king crab left alone, there'd be 10 million pounds of crab at $5 a crab or $5 a pound. But the government says, no, 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 no. If we fish 10 million pounds of crab, there'll be no king crab left. So let's set a quota, a maximum amount at 8 million pounds of crab. So what does that do to the market? Well, it creates something known as quota rent. At 8 million pounds of crab, the minimum price received to produce is $4. The maximum willingness to pay is $6. So in the market, consumers will pay $6 a pound to get the 8 million pounds of crab. The supplier was willing to accept as little as 4. So they have received a price over and above their minimum. Anytime you get a price that's greater than the minimum willingness to sell, we call that rent. And in this case, that rent is being created by the quota. So the distance between the supply and demand curve at the quota amount is known as the quota rent. We also have something known as deadweight loss. That is the loss in consumer and producer surplus created by failing to reach equilibrium. So we set a quota at 8 million crab. The market wanted to go to 10. So we have this triangular area in yellow that is consumer and producer surplus that we would have enjoyed had the market gone to 10 million pounds of crab, that we don't because we're stopped at 8 million. So we could measure the value of that dead weight loss by using the area of a triangle formula, 1/2 base times height, to measure the total amount of surplus lost by the quota. The same, by the way, with dead weight loss is also true if we have price floors and price ceilings, because again, we're not getting to the equilibrium quantity. And so there is dead weight loss in those two cases as well. If we were looking at this graph, what's the quota rent? Well, if there's a quota of 7 million rides, we look at the graph and we say at 7 million rides, the demand price, what people are willing to pay, is $6.50. We do it at 7, we go up till we hit the demand curve at 6.50. What's the supply price? Well, at 7 million rides, it's $3.50. So we can see here that the quota rent is $3. Suppliers were willing to accept as little as $3.50. They get to charge $6.50. So there's a $3 quota rent here. There's also an area of deadweight loss marked by that red triangle. We would have gone to 10 million rides if the market did not have a quota, but we don't get there. So we could measure that area as 1/2 base times height. So it'd be 1/2 times the quota rent of $3 times the $3 lost, or sorry, 3 million rides lost. So that would come out to 1/2 times 3 times 3. It's $4.5 million in lost surplus. You could practice this on your own. Again, look at the questions, pause, see if you got the answer. When you're confident of your answer, then go ahead and press play, see how you did. If the government established a quota of 1,000 units in this market, what would the demand price be? In this case, it would be $8. So hopefully you said 8. We set the quota at 1,000. We do this vertical line at 1,000. It hits the demand curve at $8. If the government established a quota of 1,000 in this market, what would the quota rent be? Again, pause the video, see if you can calculate it, and then when you're confident of your answer, go ahead and press play. If there's a quota of 1,000, the demand price is 8, the supply price is 4, so the quota rent in this case would be $4 per unit of rent. All right, next time we're going to talk a little bit more about why trade is beneficial, and I will see you then.